The night. Everything collapsed. His room was perfectly quiet. He heard none of the storm. He was listening to something older. 1. When the panic started, everyone checked a number. One man checked a sound. The banks had closed at midnight. 3 men had lost everything by dawn. And in a small room at the edge of the city, a blind man sat with a tuning fork in his lap and did not move. He was not calm. He was listening to something the city had forgotten it once knew. 2. His name was August. 40 years of tuning pianos. He had never owned one. His room a chair, a bed, a row of tuning forks by pitch. A ledger, in handwriting no one else could read, recording the notes of every instrument he had ever touched. Not whether the piano was beautiful, not whether the owner was kind, only whether the note was true. People considered him strange. He had been strange since the night he lost everything, 23 years before, when the number on his own account had stopped making sense, and the only thing left in the apartment was the tuning fork his teacher had left him. He had struck it against the floor. 440 hertz, the note that does not negotiate. It was still there. He had decided that night never to outsource it again. 3. By the second hour of the crisis, a man named Hartwell stood in his kitchen in his robe and could not stop opening the same application on his phone. The number changed each time. Each time it was worse. He called his advisor. His advisor did not answer. He called his lawyer. His lawyer said, "I'm looking into it," which meant I don't know either. Hartwell had spent 30 years building a life in which someone always knew. He had not considered what would happen when that stopped being true. He stood at the kitchen counter until his hand went numb. He kept looking. The number kept changing. It was the same gesture, repeated, the way a man presses a bruise, not to heal it, but because he cannot believe it still hurts. 4. 2 streets away, a woman named Clara sat in her car in the dark and ran the calculations again. She had run them before the crisis. She had run them during. The answer was the same each time, and the answer was not good, and yet she could not stop, as though the calculation itself was the last thing keeping her attached to the situation. Control. She had never called it that. She called it due diligence. But what she was doing, at 2 in the morning in a parked car, holding onto a ship, already far from shore, was the same thing Hartwell was doing, in his kitchen, looking at numbers that had already finished moving. 5. The storm had been building for months. Everyone in the city had felt it. The way certain words had quietly disappeared from certain conversations. Stability. Guarantee. Forever. The wealthy had constructed, over many decades, an elaborate architecture of calm, a portfolio, a network, a legacy. What they meant was, I have placed my sense of safety inside something larger than myself, and I am trusting it not to move. The storm had other plans. 6. August set the tuning fork down at 3 a.m., not because he was finished. Because the note had settled. He moved to the window, not to look out, but because he liked the cold of the glass against his palm in the small hours. The woman downstairs had told him about the crisis the previous afternoon, in a voice that was trying not to shake. He had listened. He had said thank you. She had waited for more. There was no more. He knew what she wanted, what everyone wanted, someone to tell them what the number should be. August did not trade in numbers. He traded in something else entirely. 7. When August was 20, his teacher had given him a single instruction. Before you touch the instrument, the old man said, you must already know the note. How can I know the note before I hear it? You are not listening for the note. You are listening for the distance between what is and what should be. And how do I know what should be? The teacher was quiet for a long time. Then, that is what you spend your life building. August had spent 40 years building it. A fixed point. Internal. Uncoupled from weather, from markets. From the opinions of men in fine suits. 440 hertz. The note that does not negotiate. 8. Clara drove to August's building at 7 in the morning. She did not know him. She had heard of him from a client. He found a flaw I had been living with for 6 years, the client had said. He said I had simply stopped hearing it, because I had grown accustomed to wrong. She rang the bell. He opened the door. She said, I need to ask you something. He stepped back and let her in. She sat in the one chair. He sat on the edge of the bed. She said, how do you stay like this? He waited. Calm, she said. Last night. The whole city was, and you were just... She stopped. August said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, I lost everything once. She looked up. Different crisis. Same feeling. I stood in my apartment and the only thing left was this. He held up the tuning fork. I hit it against the floor. It was still 440. I decided that night that nothing outside me would ever be the last word on that. Clara looked at it. That's all? That's all, he said. And it took 20 years to make it true. 9. He struck the fork once. The note filled the room. Steady. Patient. Completely unconcerned with anything outside the window. Most people, he said, do not have this. Not because they couldn't build it, because everything outside was working. So they never learned what they were like. When it stopped, he set it down. The crisis didn't take their money first. It took their note. 10. Clara sat with that for a long time. Outside, the city was beginning. The particular chaos of a morning after. Inside, it was 40 years of a man deciding every day what would remain fixed. Not because the world agreed, but because he had decided. She thought about the calculations. She thought about the car. She thought about the ship. She said, what do I do with all the numbers? August almost smiled. Learn which ones are yours, he said. And which ones you borrowed. 11. He never told her what to buy. He never told her what to sell. She had not, in the end, needed a map. What she needed was what she left with. The sudden cold weight of her own hands. 12. Hartwell sold 3 properties that year. Clara restructured everything. The city rebuilt. Slowly. With new language for the same old bets. And new suits on the same old hope. That this time the room would hold still. August tuned pianos. He did not change what he was listening for. 13. Here is the thing no one mentions. About the men who lost everything that night. Most of them rebuilt. The portfolios came back. The networks reformed. The language of stability and guarantee returned to the dinner table. What did not come back, what none of them went looking for, was the thing that had failed first. Not the number. The note. The frequency that was supposed to be theirs. That had never, in fact, been built. They had borrowed it. From the room. The room had moved. They were still looking for it. In the same place. 14. You are not listening for the note. You are listening for the distance between what is and what should be. When did you last know the difference? Without checking a number, without calling someone who was supposed to know, without waiting for the room to hold still first. Safe became another word for trapped. He was the only one who had not been safe.